But here we are
Here we
again.
are.
Yes. I would love to talk about the 4130 that you sent to me from Jonah Dempsey. And you know why? Not just
Right.
because of you, but also I have that channel in my Chiron chart.
Wow.
So that's interesting, right?
Yeah, very interesting. Um, I love what he was talking about. Um, and that video is old for him. It's like,
2 years.
yeah, I took notes because I'm so visual. But last night I was working on it a bit, and I was thinking that I wanted to look at wait, I want to change my screen around so I can see my Word document while we talk. Um, there we go. Now I can see us and document at the same time. I wanted to look at it because he's talking, when people talk about the channels, right? They're talking about the channel in general. And I'm so fascinated with lines
Mm.
that I thought to myself, I want to look at what Jonah's saying in relationship to
Line companion.
the line companion. So I took a bunch of notes last night. It was the last thing I did before I went to bed. But let me ask you, what was it that you loved about what Jonah said?
What I understood about that channel, it's about feeling, deep feeling, the desire to feel. So I even feel like it's more emotional than the 35, 36. And that it's about recognizing that you have this wave. And it also has to do with experience. So it's almost like you go looking for an emotional experience. And that's why
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear some experiences from you. Like, how did you experience your channel when you heard Jonah talk about it?
Well, I was thinking about the layering of that channel with the five, no, the 35, my um
Your sun or your earth?
it's my uh sun, my evolution sphere.
Right.
And I was also, adventure, and then there's the 4130, which is a bit of adventure, right?
Yeah,
Because you're going looking for something
right.
and for something. And I was also thinking about the place you're looking from, because he was talking about that um, the object is of your desire, or the
Right.
thing that catapults you to go looking is there's a decrease or a lack, or
Yeah.
you want something, you want an emotional
Right.
experience. So off you go and you have that big experience. I was also thinking about the reason why you go looking, right?
Oh.
And how that layers with my 35
Mm.
um, of hunger, adventure. What is it? Um, I'm tired this morning. It's not. Is it bounteousness?
Can your sound go a little bit up?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, sorry.
No, no problem. But for the recording,
How's that?
talk to me.
How's that? Is that
Yeah,
better?
better, better. Yeah, perfect. Sorry.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'm so glad you asked. Yeah. So I was thinking about the complex of that, and I was also thinking about the complexities in my chart about how uh how much stillness is in my chart,
Yeah,
right?
right.
you know? So then I was also thinking about the details of my chart that are about how I go looking, which is under the radar.
Right.
Um, so I was thinking about having 4 planets in Sag and my moon in Scorpio and how that affects, like I have this fire, there's a 35, but I
Yeah.
have 3 other planets in Sag, and and then that Scorpio moon, it's 1 degree out of
Oh,
Sagittarius.
wow.
So, you know, um, and then, the emotionalness of a Sagittarian moon driving, So I was really kind of mesmerized by, which is something that I'm often mesmerized by is the dimensions of the chart.
Right. Yeah.
It's not so cut and dry. Yeah.
So,
Well, what did you think of? How did it impact you?
well, I looked it up before because I saw it in my Chiron chart. So I read about a little bit about it in one of Ra's works. And, Ra's also very confrontating. So it's like always a little bit negative. So I got a little bit scared of channel, like the desire and then not getting the satisfaction or something about that. And then I heard Jonah and I was like, it just feels like it's gonna give me a new experience in my emotional wave.
Mhm.
So maybe because now I feel like I'm really, flowing with my wave ever since I'm like, I don't know, when I got out of my burnout, it was like this whole wave was just, no real big ups and downs anymore. So when I was hearing him, I was like, okay, so my new challenge is because what they say in your cycle charts is that you do not have to engage with the activation. So you kind of going to be aware of what could happen.
Right.
So I was like, okay, so when the Chiron return hits me, so to speak, I'm probably gonna feel more emotional than I feel right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I also feel like I'm now being prepared, and now I'm gonna hear your experience with it. So maybe I'm gonna
Well,
learn beforehand what it means.
I agree with that in the sense that when we do our work, when we have a return, it's like we don't have to backpedal to kick
Right.
stuff out of our field. We've already been doing the backpedaling to kick out whatever. I use the metaphor of a bicycle often with a return that, you're riding your
Right.
bike and on the return your pedals start going backwards and you start
Right.
kicking out. You have the opportunity to deal with the stuff that
Right.
it's you're ready to let go of. So when you've been doing that work, there's not so much to let go of. And so yeah, it's an easier process. I love that when I did the line companion, my statement for the 30 was, or the notes I took were about the ability to sustain my dreams, intentions, or visions until I bring them into form. And that's how I inspire passion in others with the power of my dreams,
Right.
and to be aware how, and also to be aware how my intensity impacts others, which Jonah touched on too, that
Yeah.
he doesn't have that channel. And when he's in someone's field who has the 3041, how that affects both of them. And then even after that person goes away and stuff. And when I had my reading with Cohen, he talked about how I was here to um, inspire others, people's hopes and dreams. Now I understand,
Right.
what part of my chart he was getting that
Right.
from the 30 0.3 in my chart. And I feel like the way that's happened in my life is that um I just had my experience. And, you know, looking back, even, you know, a good example is when Trey and I were separating and then choosing to divorce, to end what we had, create something new. I didn't really tell anybody. There's the, you know, how I move forward under the, you know,
Right.
and I think that that was so powerful because we didn't have other people projecting onto us
Right. With their opinions. Right.
their opinions. And after we're through it all and we reunite, we do become, you know, I do see that my whole journey can inspire passion in others.
Yeah, I can remember that you wrote an email with Unlock Your Design,
Mm-hmm.
and I read it. And the funny thing is, I thought about that, about your separating from Trey this week. I wanted to talk to you about that, but because you never mentioned it before, I was like, maybe you don't want to talk about it anymore. But I remember it. That email, and it was I never read those emails, but yours I did. And I don't know why, but it was a very beautiful story, like real life experience.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm happy to share any of that experience with anyone because I do feel like it inspires passion. You know, it has the capacity to inspire passion in others, which is part of my, you know, 30.
Right.
And what I feel is inspiring is that the way we went through that process, and we had a shared goal or intention, which was to remain friends.
Hmm.
And so when you're breaking apart a 36, that by that time we were together 38 years, when you're, you know, and then, you know, I'm looking at my line 3 and 30, you know,
Yeah.
bonds being broken.
Right.
You know, that was a big bond to break, right? And we were truly committed to remaining friends. And that wasn't really the primary motivation for that was our children and our grandchildren.
Mm.
And it was freaking hard. It was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It required so much presence. It really required patience. My lives were, you know. It also required my culture sphere beyond forgiveness. And it required me to not, there's a part of my chart, I can't remember which one it is. I think it might be in my attractor sphere. That the shadow is you run or you make the other person wrong when you're challenged. You know, so how to end something without making the other person wrong,
Right.
blaming the other person, without running away. You know, in the sense that I left Arizona and I went to Hawaii. Some people might see that as running away, but for me, it was that, you know, the big challenge was the weather was killing me, the heat was killing me. I just needed to get out of the heat.
Yeah.
And that was my primary motivation, to find some new place that my body could be sustained. And being that my determination is cold,
Right.
so
Yeah.
you know, and it's so hot in Arizona, and it just really impacted my health.
Right.
So And then our journey of coming back together, of I was so in my emotional wave, just, I was just getting so many downloads, and I would be getting timing about messages, which took a lot of patience because, I'd get a download of a message and I would be given an exact day to give that message to Trey. And I'd just have to be with that message until the moment. It was always in divine timing, wasn't pushing. I was so patient through that process. And when I share my journey with people, what some people have said to me is that it's given them to have the courage
Right.
to choose love in their life. And sometimes that means ending something.
Right.
And on a really basic level, I think a lot of that experience was strategy and authority, because we were separated for a really long time. So we had this big house. We couldn't do anything until, we sold the house.
Right.
Really. And so we were living in our own rooms. So we're 2 years, we're in this house. It was, and I was going back and forth to Hawaii. And I had said that I wanted to end our marriage, and Trey didn't want to, and I just couldn't completely end it, it was like not the divine timing, and I just sat in that, and it took 2 years. And then one day I was driving down the hill going into town, and it was so fascinating. Oh, Clorinda, can we please pause for just a minute? So I feel like when, the way my field works, when I'm with someone and I'll either see something from my life in my internal screen. I have inner vision, and I actually am clairvoyant. So I have a screen I see things
Right.
on. When I see something from that experience, because it's a long experience, I'll share it with people. And even the emotional wave part of that, I think I was at the part of telling my story where I was driving down the hill,
Right.
and I'm 2 years in, and Trey had called. I was just getting ready to leave the house, and he called and he said, "Can you talk?" And I said, "I'm leaving the house. Let me get in the car. I will call you right away." So I get in the car, get my headset plugged in, and I literally had the microphone right here. Because Trey was always saying to me at that time, he'd always say, "I can't hear you. I can't hear you." So I have my headset all, so I'm in the car, I have the microphone literally on my lips. I can't do more than that. So I go down the hill and I call him, and, he's starting with, "I can't hear you." And I hear this message. He's never going to hear you. And it was like that was my message from the universe. And right when I had heard the voice, he's not going to hear you.
Right.
This big rainbow came out literally right in front of me. It was like almost like I could touch it. And that was my sign. In that moment, after 2 years of not knowing what to do, I had the clarity. He can't hear you. And once I had the clarity, everything opened up and I knew what I had to do. And then it was all done, like really, really, really quickly, because I had put everything in place. But so, patience, I
But
mean, there's so,
what was the solution then? Because
well,
if somebody can't hear you, yeah.
we talked about it. I said, I can't make you hear me.
Oh, wow.
I can't make you hear me. You either need hearing aids, or we're on such different vibratory planes. It's not going to matter if you have a hearing
Right.
aid.
Right.
You can't hear what I'm saying.
Right.
I felt like it was vibrational at that point. I
Yeah.
had done so much work,
Yeah.
that we were just on different vibratory planes. He
Right.
wasn't right or wrong. I wasn't right or wrong. It just didn't work anymore. Bonds made me broken,
Right.
And then, we still remain friends. I mean, on the day I went to court, you have to go to court, and there's a process if you show up in court and a process if you don't show up. And the one that if you show up, it's all much quicker and easier. So I went to court, and he texted me and he was like, are you okay? And please come see me afterwards. I want to support you through this. So I left the courthouse and I went to see him. And we shared that moment. It was really hard. And yet I knew it was right. It was correct. It was in alignment, And yeah, and then to stay friends, and we were friends for 2 years before we reunited. And even in that, that was hard. We're no longer legally bound.
Mm.
And yet we find a way to forge a friendship so that our choices, don't impact our kids, our grandkids. And part of that was, Trey's dad was married 4 times. And Trey's dad and his mom, even though his dad was married 3 other times, they still loved each other. They still loved each other. And it was so hard to be with them in physical presence in the same room. Everyone was uncomfortable because they were so uncomfortable. And Trey said, I don't want to ever do that to my kids.
Right.
And I don't want us to ever be so unfriendly, unkind, that we can't both be at some event that's important to our kids or our grandkids. So that's why we forged a new friendship, found our way through it. And I'm not saying that that's possible for everyone, because that's not everyone's path.
Right.
But there are people for whom that journey is a powerful journey to hear that
Right.
it's possible. And what else was powerful, I think, for women is that there I am choosing me.
Right. I did the same. Yeah.
And like you, we have that in common. And I was at the end of my career, when maybe it's different in other places in the world, but most often women aren't ending a marriage at, later in life.
Right.
Yeah. And so I feel like I give courage to other women who
Who are not happy in their relationship, to just choose them. Yeah.
to choose them and move forward. Doesn't
But
matter
also,
really.
Right.
what
But
time
also
of
how you come
life.
back together. How did you find each other again? How was that?
So fascinating. So, in that 2 years that between when our marriage ended and when we got back together, um, our house sold the day, talk about the universe and alignment. So our house wouldn't sell, it wasn't selling. And I wanted to rent my own place. I was living with Elizabeth and renting part of the house she lived in, but I really wanted my own place. I'd never lived by myself. I went from my parents' house to Trey's house,
Right.
and Trey's house was completely done. Like I never had the creative experience. And maybe this was my 30, 41. Never had the experience of creating a home from scratch where I got to make every choice. And it was a complete expression of the truth of who I am.
Right.
So I decided to rent an apartment, which was a big leap for me because I still had my part of our expenses for a home. And,
Yeah.
I was putting my name on the dotted line, right? For another, for an apartment and stuff. The day I signed that lease, our house sold.
Wow.
The universe was like, this house is not selling until we know
Right. Until you really right.
you are gone. You are completely committed.
Right.
So it was a huge leap, but I did it. And then, when we got the contract on the house, it was the day or the day after, I was like, oh, okay, this is the divine, the universe was just waiting for me to say, yes, I'm, and it really had to do with Arizona as a astrocartography place. It's a really hard place for my being. And I knew that when we moved there, but I just dealt with it.
Right.
So then I did, when I was still working in Tucson, I still had my job. And so I had to go back and forth, and Trey said, well, you can stay with me. So you don't have to rent something and spend more money. So I actually would stay with him when I was in Tucson. And I was in Tucson, and I got this, I had been in Hawaii in my own apartment for about 8 or 9 months. And I mean, this is all tied into the Delta with the gene keys.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's where you met Bella, right?
Yeah. And Jen and Marilyn and Alea, who does acupresence. So when I was in Hawaii, in my apartment, I ended up doing the Delta call and being in that first round of Deltas. And when I was in Hawaii, I had done acupresence. Alea was on Kauai. It was a short hop. And so I was building this new network, right? And so the people in my Delta lived from Cortez Island down the coast of California. Bella was the only one who wasn't from California up through Vancouver Island in Canada. So I was home at Trey's house in Tucson, and a client called, and she was telling me about this astrocartography experience. And I knew this wasn't a client that I had it's not a friend, it's just a client, randomly called with this astrocartography information. And in that moment, I knew I needed that, because I had been meditating in my apartment in Hawaii, and I heard this voice. It's like the voice of God for me sometimes, and said, you will not be here by December. And I kind of was like, where will I not be? Will I not be here in Hawaii on Earth?
Right. What is it? Yeah.
And then the energy just collapsed. So I was like, okay, go to patience, it'll come. So it came. So I do this astrocartography session, and my Jupiter line, my moon, my Chiron, my Venus, and I think my Mercury all go. I mean, there's my Chiron right from Vancouver Island to the northern part of California is this big geometry. And so the astrocartographer I, was working with, he was like, Vancouver Island is the best spot for you in, the whole world.
Right.
It's like, and it's like so intense. So I decided I was gonna go try out Vancouver Island. So I worked it out with my landlord. I got out of my lease a month early. I go back to Arizona. I pack up my car with some clothes. I have a little Subaru, and I head to Canada. And I landed with my Delta sister Jen and also Elka on Cortez Island. And I absolutely love living on Vancouver Island. It is flipping amazing for me. And you might be wondering, like, okay, what does that feel like? I can just tell you that my body hums. I feel it here in Seattle because my Jupiter line is right here. And I can literally, when I fly home into Seattle, when I get off the plane, I can literally feel my body resyncing with Jupiter.
Wow.
It's pretty incredible for me.
Yeah.
So I'm up on Vancouver Island, and I had this series of magical experiences. They were all astrological experiences. It was like there was an eclipse, and I went to this labyrinth heart full moon experience with these horses in this horse sized labyrinth. And it was so powerful that I did some more work with this astrologer. And then one day I just got a download of this message that I needed to send Trey. And I was literally given, that was one of the times I was given a precise date. So I had time to contemplate that message, and I worked with it with the person I work with, Dominique, and it was all ready to go. And then randomly, my mom called me. It was like a Friday, and she said, I can't, my dad had Alzheimer's, and she was caring for him in their home. And she goes, I can't do it anymore. It's bigger than me. And I need you to come help me get him in the veterans home in their Alzheimer's unit. I was like, okay, when? And she was like, as soon as you can get here. So I'm God, I'm about 2/3 of the way up Vancouver Island. It is no small feat to get from Vancouver Island to Louisiana. So I make all the arrangements, and I leave my house Saturday afternoon. I drive the 5 hours down to Victoria, get a hotel, get up the next morning to get a plane at 5 a.m. And that was the day that I was supposed to send the message. So this completely unrelated things.
Right.
So I'm at the airport in Victoria, and I have the message on my phone. I copy and paste it right when I'm getting onto the plane, and I put it in a text. Now Trey doesn't know that I'm
Flying away, right?
because it all just happened. She called me on Friday. I'm driving. I think I left my house Saturday afternoon right after lunch.
Right.
And so I text him that, and then I turned my phone off because I got on the plane. I had to turn my phone off. So then I had to fly from Victoria to San Francisco, get to San Francisco, turn my phone back on, and Trey messaged me back. And I didn't have time to message him. It was a quick connection. So I get on my plane from San Francisco to Atlanta, which was like 5 or 6 hours. And I'm really thinking about the message that he sent me, which was that my message to him was that basically, listen, I love you. That doesn't change. I'm always going to be your friend. We're friends. And simultaneously, I'm still emotionally taking care of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to take care of myself. And so I don't know what that's going to look like, but what it may look like is that I'm not so available, because I need to be available to me.
Right.
And I want you to know that I love you. We're friends, but I need to take care of myself now because we're, yeah.
You need years together. No time for you from, like you said, from your parents to his house, and then where's Simone? Yeah, get it.
So he messaged me back, and it was a very loving message, and but he asked me a question, and I don't remember what the question was, but I get on the airplane and I cry for 6 hours. And I'm like, why am I crying? I just kept asking, what is this? What is this? And if you're not in love with him, why is this so hard?
Right. Yeah.
And I had to admit that I still was in love with him. So I land in Atlanta and I'm on the last, I have one more flight to Louisiana. And I crafted a message while I was on the plane, and I said, I love you. And I don't think I wanted to admit that, but there it is. I'm gonna face it. And I don't remember what else I said, but basically that was the gist, I love
right.
you.
Yeah.
Then I have to turn my phone off again.
right. It's so weird, but it's perfect.
It's so perfect.
Yeah.
And then I get to Louisiana and I'm getting off the plane, turn my phone back on, and he says that he loves me too. He's never stopped loving me. And can we please talk about this?
Right.
So I text message him and I just said, yes, we can talk about it. And simultaneously, I need a moment because my dad's going into the VA Alzheimer's unit. I'm here with, I just landed in Louisiana. What's so funny is he was on a journey too, and I didn't even know it. He was going to Bali in Texas. So, like all these, pauses, he was literally
right.
on a physical journey of
right.
driving, and he was going to see and do that journey with one of his best friends, Elizabeth. And so I just say to him, listen, I don't have the emotional energy to do this with you right now because I just landed in Louisiana. I have to be present here. It's going to take everything I have to get my mom and dad through this experience. And it was like, I completely understand. Take care of your parents. If I can help you in any way, let me know. So it was challenging because my dad, there were moments where he was completely there, and then other moments where it was like, and it was so up and down that I was almost like, is this really the end for her? Could she keep doing it? But I know now that she was completely stressed out and she had nothing left, So we get through that. We're going through that experience, and we had a day. We had to, it was a lot. But 2 nights before we leave, my mother is just unloading on me, just really angry, yelling, very violent. And I'm just like, I've got 3 or 4 days left and I'm just trying to get through, So after dinner, I remained calm. I was able to just remain calm and patient and be in the state of compassion that, this is a lot for her. Her life is crumbling. So then the next day was the last day of my dad's life outside of an Alzheimer's unit. And I wanted to take him to see his sister. And I had been saying to my mom, I want to take him to see his sister. And his sister doesn't drive anymore. And they were really close. And I kept saying, how about today? How about today? My mom was like, no, not today, not today. So it's the last day. So the night before, I'm like, I'm going to take him to see his sister tomorrow. You know, you can come if you want. You don't have to if you don't want. Well, she chose not to. So I take my dad. And when we got home, she was on a tear. And I know she was emotionally just crumbling, cracking open, right? But she yelled at my dad. And that's when I lost my patience.
Right.
And it was really bad. So the night before, I had tried to call my sons and they weren't available. So I called Trey and I told him what was going on. And he basically talked me off the ledge and, you know, helped me get back to my center. And I was so grateful. And he said, Simone, call me back if you need. And so the next day, it was really abusive. I mean, even I tried to walk away quietly and just go for a drive. And my mother lowered the garage door on the car. I mean, she stood outside the car just screaming at me. It was really bad. So finally, I went for a little drive and I pulled over and I called her and I said, listen, I can't take all this yelling and screaming. I just can't do it. I'm not angry. Everything's going to be okay. But I can't do this violence.
Right.
I just can't do it. And she begged me. She was like, please come home. Please come home. I won't yell. I'll be good. So I was like, okay. So I went back and helped her. You know, we ate, cleaned up the kitchen, whatever. I couldn't hardly eat. It was so interesting. I was sitting there at the table and she had made this kind of Cajun delicacy, a crawfish etouffee, something my dad really loved. And I couldn't even eat it. And I felt like, you know, what it felt like when I was a child. Our mealtime was always extraordinarily stressful because my dad would pick on my older brother. And it was just not, there was always some abuse at the table, always something. And that's what I felt like as I sat there.
Right.
And so then I go for a walk and I call Trey and I tell him what happens. And he asks me this question. He's like, Simone, why are you choosing abuse? And I'm like, you know, like the big light bulb goes off. Like, he goes, you don't choose abuse in any aspect of your life. Why do you choose abuse here? And I was like, interesting question. He goes, you have money. Call an Uber. Get a hotel. You don't need to stay in this abuse. And so it was like, he's right. I don't want to ever choose abuse in my life again. So I went back and quietly, I was, you know, my parents always, their home, they never had space for anybody in their home. So I literally have been there like 10 days. I've been living out of a carry-on suitcase. It took me like 3 minutes to get, you know, my makeup and my toothbrush in, because throw my shoes in. I mean, because I'm literally living out of, you know, a little tiny suitcase. And, you know, there was no place in a 3-bedroom house for me to unpack. It's just so interesting.
Yeah.
And so I told them, it was really beautiful. I said to them, listen, I love you. I'm a good person. And a lot of that is because of, you know, how you raised me.
Right.
And I'm grateful for that because I like who I am. And simultaneously, the elephant in the room is that you've been mentally, emotionally, and verbally, sometimes physically abusive to me. And that's okay. But from here on out,
no more.
No more. I will never be silent about abuse again.
No.
If you speak to me in a way that's not appropriate, we're going to talk about it. And my dad didn't want me to leave. It was heart-wrenching. But anyway, it ended up being fine. And I feel like that's because I was in my emotional truth.
Yeah.
And because I was in my emotional truth, and I wasn't trying to make them wrong, I was just saying, look, I'm good. You know, you raised me. Thank you for that. but I'm not gonna just be quiet about abuse anymore.
Right.
And there wasn't, like anything other than this is how I'm gonna act in my world, and I'm leaving because I can't do this anymore. And so the next day I went back and well, the night that back to Troy. So Trey had texted me and said, please call me or please text me when you get to the hotel so that I know you're safe. So the Uber comes and I go to the hotel and I'm dragging my suitcase and I'm texting him at the hotel. I'm fine. And I have this awareness that he has been showing up differently for me.
He's listening. That's what I'm hearing. When you were talking, I was like, he's listening. He's finally hearing you. I'm getting chills now. Like, wow.
And as I have that thought, that consciousness, that
Right.
awareness, I'm scrolling through and I didn't have the awareness that, oh, he's listening to you now.
No.
So I'm looking for it in his text. I'm like trying to discern, like, through what he's saying to me, through his responses. And right when I'm looking through my text, he goes, I know you're going to be okay because you're showing up differently. So we had the same thought in the same moment, right?
Right.
And I text him, I just thought that same thought about you. And then he calls me and we talked for 4 or 5 hours. And by the end of it, he said, can we get back together? I love you. And I said, well, I need to think about it.
Yeah.
I need to think about it. I said, what I'm capable of saying right now is in this moment, yes, in this moment. And that's how we live now, is that we're not married. I don't want to be married. My commitment is day to day.
Right.
And I feel like different people need different things, but for us, this is what keeps us in alignment with ourselves. Because, it's almost like 3 on steroids, right? Bonds made and broken. Because when you don't have that legal bond.
Right. You have to work on it every day. You're every day aware of what could happen. You have to work on it. Yeah, there's no, it's not being taken for granted, right?
Yeah. And it's created for us an honesty.
Right.
That we're really honest about everything. Because when you have, in a sense, the proverbial gun to your head every day, show up.
Yeah.
Or this bond may be broken, you do show up. Or at least I do. I show up, and he has to show up too. And that's not to say that we don't have moments where one of us is not showing up and the other person says it. Like,
right.
I feel like we're, it's not about blame or anything, but we usually have
it's about awareness. Yeah.
What's going on?
Keeping each other sharp.
We keep each other sharp,
Wow.
And that's so powerful. It's such a powerful place to live life from. So how can, I feel like my journey can inspire passion in other people, because how magnificent to be able to empower yourself to live your correctness in every moment of every day, whatever that is. And it's not that, I heard Brené Brown, she said something like, with she and her husband, she has a video about how none of us are 100% all the time. Yeah. And in marriage, it's 50-50. You show up and you meet in the middle. Right. And that's what the partnership is, and how she and her husband do a check every evening. Like, I'm at 30%. And the other person might be at 50% and say, I'm at 50, I got you, I'll spot you the 20, and I love that, because it's such an honest, an honest awareness of what you're bringing to the relationship. And for Trey and I, it's like we don't need to have that conversation every day. When we do have to have it, though, is when one of us is really low energy. Because let's say that one of us gets to 10-20%.
Right.
You and I've talked about this, I think, before. And then we talk about that because that's what we need, you know. But I hope that, you know, everybody's designed differently and there's correctness for everyone. But I hope that my journey with my 30, you know, because all of that is part of the 30-41, don't you think?
Absolutely. The whole story, I was thinking, this is exactly the perfect example of how this channel works. Every part in it. Yeah.
And I do hope that it inspires other people. I mean, everything from choosing, you know, part of that journey was choosing to come and live where the vibration was the best vibration for me in the world. And taking the, you know, like I didn't have any internal innate desire to live in the Pacific Northwest. You know, I would love to be in Canada, but I'm not in a group that it's easy for, you know, if I had more money, maybe I could figure out but the, you know, Pacific Northwest for me is close to enough of my lines that it really does feel great for me. And, you know, what's also kind of stunning about how the universe works is after I left Canada, I started trying out some places here in Washington. And I tried out one and well, even before I left, no, I guess it was right around when I came into Washington. Trey had a customer come into his business and she knew about us. She was his dentist wife, and she and her husband worked at their dental practice together. And Trey had become friends with her over the years, and she was a customer at Gather. And she came in, and you know, I can't remember exactly how it went down, but Trey said, "Well, do you want to buy?" She told Trey that they had sold their dentistry practice, and her husband was 20 years older than her and wanted to retire, and she wasn't ready to retire. She wanted something to do, and Trey jokingly said, "Well, I'll sell you my business." And Simone and I are getting back together, and she can't live here; it's too hot. And that's who ended up buying his business. Within 3 months, his business was sold. Just from, you know, that was the universe like so providing. And then we come to, you know, he follows me to Washington because he knows I can't live in Arizona. It's just too hot. Right. And then he finds his narrow valley.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like it becomes his correctness too.
Right. Right.
So, you know, another passion thing of follow your dreams, you know, find your correctness. Live as much of your design as you possibly can. I mean, if all you can do is strategy and authority, that's great. But if you can work in determination, if you can work in your environment, you know, what can you do? Like to what level can you, you know, if you can only integrate a little bit, integrate that. And then what does that lead you to? What does that lead you to? Right. You know, you just keep getting more and more aligned.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just keep going back in my mind to your story. I really took it in, and constantly my brain was telling me like, oh, this is exactly what Jonah Dempsey said about the lack. There was something lacking in the relationship. Where was the passion? You know, where was the things that you needed in the relationship? And then, like you said with your third line, like, okay, it doesn't fulfill me anymore. So let's take another experience, do something else, right? I desire to be alone. And then to try that out and how you came back together. It's like, yeah, I just love me a beautiful love story. And that's what I heard.
Well, and you know, like so much of it, like if we look at, I'm the 41.4 in my root, which is also my pearl. So, you know, it's important.
Yeah.
But that particular shade, the line 4 shade of the 41, is about my imagination generating ideas about abundant opportunities. And so, you know, I mean, the my mind, you know, like going to Hawaii, like figuring out how to do my job from Tucson and Hawaii, and, you know, renting an apartment. You know, it took courage and
Yeah.
an idea about an abundant opportunity, and then being locked into a lease and knowing that I needed to get to Canada and pitching an idea to my landlord, who was like, oh, that works better for me too. And then, you know, just that 41 was pulsing, pulsing, pulsing.
Right.
My 30.
Wow. Yeah, and even
In
with your downloads, I I don't know which one I was listening or from whom, but it was about 64. What is the channel 64? I know the 40 64 4. Is that the right one?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I have that channel.
Yeah, you have that. And it was speaking on that. And I was thinking immediately about you. And now you gave an example even of how that works with that constant download that you have, like with an open head like me. So what I came to realize right now was that I don't have that constantly access or that constant download. But maybe when I'm with you, we're going to experiment on that. Then I'm going to take in your downloads. That's what they say. You take in the other. So I'm kind of excited about, like, okay, how would that work when we are together? Would I get your downloads? Would I get them at the same time? Would I get them before you? I don't know.
Well, and how will your 4130, your Chiron channel, be activated in my field? And
Right. Because
yeah.
that is a conditioning channel for me now when I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited for everything. Like when we come together and experiment for real. We haven't shared that before, but I'm leaving on the 12th of October to meet up with Simone. And we're going to do the real life experiment. And I'm hoping that we can film some, but afterwards at least we can share about our experiments and experience with it. Yeah.
I love that. You know, I was listening to Richard Beaumont the other day, who you've turned me on to and who I really love. And he was talking about the let's see, he was talking about the, is it the 5125, the shock is 51 is shock, right? The gate of shock. And so I have an open G. He was talking about that channel that runs from the will center to the G.
Yeah.
I have a completely undefined G. And in the will center, I do have the is it the
40?
10?
I know
40.
You have 40.
Yeah, it's the 40. So I have that one gate, but it's an undefined center. And well, here we, you know, he was talking about how the gate of shock moves to an innocence. And I was listening to him and feeling into that gate of the 37. And I just was like, I had the awareness of how I don't have access to that definition.
Right.
And then he gets to the gate of innocence. And again, I don't have that, you know, access to what the vibration that he was talking. I could feel in my field, like I don't have access to that. And why did I want to share that with you? I feel like the 37 in the emotional wave. So I know how it's all coming together, how this all relates. So y'all know me, I'm a storyteller. This is the story I'm going to tell. So I was watching a video this week, and the person was talking, it was a projector woman, and she was talking about how there are three centers, the root, the solar plexus, and the will center, that projectors have access to energy through. And so she went through the root gates, and then she was like talking about the emotional center. How do you have the emotional maturity or the emotional, are you committed to that? And then in the will center, she was talking about how, are you saying, I will do this? That shows you have the will or the access to energy to do something. And are you emotionally available for something?
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like what we've been talking about with the 4130 is,
are you willing to feel what you're feeling in the moment or in the process of an experience? Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And it's funny that we're talking about the solar plexus, because I went into a platform that Alok, Alok, but I don't know his he has a new platform, and I went into a solar plexus meeting, like was what they always do, kind of for selling, because he's going to do the Living Your Design course, and but he's going to do it with everybody that wants to know more. They're going to do it in an emotional wave kind of way to make people more aware. And I wrote it down. A lot that he said I already knew, and I was it was confirming to me how I am dealing with my emotional authority. But it was frustration is stuck or unexpressed emotions. And I kind of knew it, but when he said it again, I just had to write it down. And for the projector, you can have, the bitterness can be cold or hot. And when you're hot, you're more expressive of it. So that was interesting. Cold, like you don't care, like bitterness, like, I don't know, I can't express it in words, but it's like, yeah, you get it. And then it's about how the frustration or the satisfaction and peace is available. How do I say that? I wrote down, I'm just going to say how I wrote it down. Sorry. How you feel about your unique self, about your life, that is what gives you satisfaction and peace. So if you're not satisfied about yourself, about who you are, or about how your life is at the moment, then you get to the frustration and the bitterness and the anger and such. So there was like, oh, wow. Simple, but yeah.
Yeah, so how I feel about my success relates to how much bitterness I feel.
Yeah. And there was I had a question. And that's a question I had for a long time about my 35 in my south node. And then in my moon, I have the 36. So I was asking, like, does that influence, now I'm 49, does it influence my authority? Because there was always a little doubt. And I know Leanne Wolf answered in short on YouTube on that question. And she said it's more about emotional maturity. But I wanted to know his opinion. And I was the last one with the question. And then he got kind of mad at me that I wrote down that my 35 is in my south node. And he says, planets activate gates. Gates don't activate planets. So if you don't get that, then you don't get the basics, and like, you're stupid. That's not what he literally said, but he was like, and I was like, whoa. But the funny thing is, I observed myself how I responded. I was on my phone in this Zoom room, and I saw myself going like, disassociating with it. Like, who are you to say this and that about me. I know how it works. So he started a little bit on the basics, how human design works, and da. And I was like, I know that, but it's my way of speaking because we always talk about it. But I know that, the planets activate a gate, not the other way around. But he was really correcting me. And then he got to the answer, finally, after it was a really long time that he took. And he said, it's going to say something about how you deal with your emotions. Because it went from the 35 to the 5.
Mm.
But the interesting
How
thing
you
was like,
deal with
why was I triggered? And you said something, you shared with us that the story about the abuse in your childhood and now again, just with your parents. And I talked to Hans about it, like, wow, really fascinating. I was so, I don't know the right word for it, but I was like, what just happened, And it took me like 2 days. Now I don't feel anything anymore, but it took me 2 days to get it like mentally correct for me or so, or to give it a place. And when I talked to Hans about it, it was like, why did it trigger me? And I know I have that 39. And so I was like, okay, now I am being triggered again. And it's that in my home, I was always corrected by my father, who was a manifester and had all this, leadership stuff in his chart. And he was always making me wrong for things. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, that is still a trigger. If somebody corrects me in a not in a graceful way, but like like that, I feel like that little child again. Just like you said when you were your father and mother again. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting. So they brought up a feeling.
No, it's interesting. So did you deal with the trigger in the same way you did as a child, or did you deal with the triggering in a new way?
When I was a child, I just made myself small, like, oh, I did it wrong, I have to do it right. And now I was disassociating, like, who are you to tell me that I'm wrong or that I don't know? You don't know anything about me. But I had put in the chat because somebody said, well, just follow Alok's course, then you will know the answer. And I was like, yeah, but I already did this and this course with iconic human design. So I was also thinking, but that's my thinking and I have to let that go. Like, was he picking on me because he saw in the chat, because he read the chat too, that I already had a course with somebody else? I don't know.
Could have been his trigger.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking now as well.
Could have been his trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about this quite a bit because I'm rarely triggered, so when I am triggered, I really go, oh, okay, well, what's triggering me here?
Right.
What is this? What am I, and the funny thing is I feel like we'll be triggered for our whole lives because if we're not,
it's the way you grow.
Yeah. But it is an opportunity, and sometimes I feel like the work is mine, and other times with the 5, you read in Gene Keys the 5. I can't remember. I think it's in the Gene Keys book and not in the Ways. But Richard talks about how with the 5, so it's patience, impatience, timelessness. With a 5, if you're in someone's field who needs to be triggered, or is not, if you're in the field of someone who's not dealing with their stuff, the person with the 5 can be the release valve for another person's frustration, anger, bitterness, whatever. And you have the 5,
Yeah, in my north node.
Right.
Yeah.
So were you the release valve for a looks?
Yeah, maybe. But I thought about it after, and I even thought about it, was this an emotional response? It wasn't. That's what my conclusion was. But I removed myself from the platform because I felt like this is a really immature way to take in new students, so to speak.
Right. Right.
This is not my teacher.
We were talking about this. I think this is super important because what gate is it, the 49 or the 30? There's one of them gates that I have in the solar plexus is about emotional maturity. And I feel like, let me just take a look at something.
Well, maybe it helps that he also has the 35. He's a manifestor and he has the 35-36. So he's an emotional manifestor.
Oh,
And I have
wow.
yeah.
And you have the 35-36 too. Yeah, so I've really worked on this. Here's what I want to say. I really have worked on, when I'm triggered, is it my work
Right.
or am I the release valve? And why this is important to me is because of my life's work, the 5, patience and patience timelessness. And if I'm losing my patience with someone, I look inside of myself. But the truth is that sometimes we are the release valve, and it's important to discern if this is where I have work to do, then do my work. But if I'm, you know, if and how do you discern if this is your work or not your work? I'm gonna give. Can I give an example of this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, always.
So I was flying back to Arizona, and I was leaving Washington for about 2 months. So I'd packed my car with all my belongings, and I was just taking to Arizona what I needed because I was coming back, and I was going to be staying for a while. I had another rental already set up. So I have another journey. There I am in my 4130. And I get my car all packed. I get my house cleaned, because I'm leaving a rental, and it's a big day. And everything this day goes really super well. Like I'm in flow, so much flow. It was raining that day, but it is Washington, but everything else was just flowing, 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 flowing. So I get to the place where I'm going to park my car, and there's nothing there. And I'm in this parking lot. I have the address right, and I'm like, where's all the cars? And some man comes out, and he goes, are you looking for the car park? And I go, yeah. And then he goes, well, they moved across the street. So I look across the street, and it's kind of a chaotic mess. And I realized that I'm going to have to leave my keys to my car with all my possessions in them. But I go over there, and I'm in just this really good mood because everything is always working out for me, right? And that's the day I'm having. And so I get over there, and there were 2 men, and they were just super nice and kind and helpful. And I feel safe. I'm like, okay, everything's always working out for me. My car's going to be fine. So my stuff is going to be fine. So get my suitcases. They helped me get my suitcases off, and I go, where do I wait for the bus? And they had just moved, and they were still, they're like, just wait right here. So I'm waiting for the bus, and the bus comes, and the man is yelling at me, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. And hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And I mean, just like really not nice. And so I don't really say anything. He puts my stuff in the back, and then we're going, and he's rude to me, and he continues, and I snapped. And I said to him, "Where are you from?" And he says, "I'm from Mexico." And he has a big chip on his shoulder. And I go, "Hmm." I said, in my experience, Mexican men are some of the most gracious, kind, gallant, helpful men I've ever met. And so, what's happened in your life that you are treating a woman in this way? Has this job so sucked the life out of you that you have forgotten your roots and the truth of who you are as a human being?
Wow.
And you feel it's appropriate to speak to me in the ways that you are speaking to me? Because I'm not having it. And you will speak to me with respect or stop talking. And like what comes out of me. And he tried to tell me to like stop talking, to shut up, basically, and I was not having it. Like, I am like, you will listen to me. I'm listening to you yell at me and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So I keep going on and on. But he drops me off at the airport to get a cart. I go in, and now my heart is racing, and I'm thinking, why did you lose your patience, Simone? You were, everything was going your way. Everything, like, it's been the smoothest day. Everybody else has been so helpful. And I'm just, like, I'm going through the whole process at the airport, going to check in and going through security, and every line I'm standing in, I'm sitting there like,
yeah,
why did you lose your patience? Why did you lose your patience? And I happen to have my Jinkies book in my satchel. So once I get on the plane, I open up to the 5, and that's where I read this part about the 5, about sometimes we're the escape hatch, and we say to the other person exactly what it is they need to face.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I was like, oh, this wasn't my work. This was his work, and I was just being but
you gave him a beautiful reminder of his roots. Yeah.
And and but it was hard for me, because that confrontation, I wonder where it is in my chart. I haven't really focused on that, but that confrontation, I guess maybe it was from my solar plexus too, maybe my 5, and maybe he bridged my sacral to my solar plexus, but there was an emotional maturity there that came out of me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I'm really spending a lot, time contemplating people's emotional responses.
Yeah.
And are they, where, is there a maturity there or not maturity there? And that's, I'm finding very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you could respond, but I couldn't, because I was on my phone, and I couldn't have my camera on, and I couldn't speak. So that was, they found it a little bit annoying that I couldn't, open up my speaker. So maybe there were several things that annoyed them about me. I don't know.
Well, maybe it was the perfect, divine timing, perfect question, perfect experience to tease out of the field.
Yeah.
Exactly what, maybe there was a reason why, the technology wouldn't let you.
Yeah. You know what I did? I responded in the chat with, thank you so much, Alok. Gratitude. That's with a heart. Because I felt like, what I observed was like my first response to his, making me wrong was the face that I made, like, That's how and then when he came back to answering my question, I let that go and I listened to the answer. And I was grateful for the answer because that's the only thing I asked for, not the things to make me wrong.
Which he could have been handled in, he could have said something like, hey, I'm concerned that you don't understand this. So just to clarify for anyone who's on the call or who listens to this is how this mechanic works. Now, here's the answer to you, instead of.
Exactly. That's what I said to Hans. I said he could have addressed it differently, but the
Totally.
way he did it he was embarrassing me in front of the group. And it's recorded, so anybody's gonna watch that video is gonna know Corinda.
There were a couple times with Unlock Your Design, I felt like that happened.
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering if that has to do with the 51, the gate of shock.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know their design, so.
Yeah, there were a couple of times that happened in Unlock Your Design where I felt like somebody was being it wasn't, in my opinion, the emotional, mature way to field a question or an experience.
But I know the answer to that because they both have an open solar plexus. And that was also the difference, I feel, why it didn't work for you with them. Because you are all about expressing and sharing the emotions. I saw you do that. And they are uncomfortable with these emotions because it's not them.
So a bigger question then for all of us is whether we have a defined emotional center or an undefined, however we deal or don't deal with our emotions, if we're comfortable expressing them or not comfortable expressing them, can we receive other and not make them wrong for the way they
feel? Right.
They feel. Somebody asked me, I had a client yesterday who asked me an interesting question. I have a client who is doing this dream work and she wanted to share that dream work with me. I had asked her to. So we were having a call. She was explaining this dream work she's doing. So she explained it to me, and then she was talking about some of the purposes for doing the dream work. And she said, well, for instance, do you feel like Trey is weak? And I was like, God, Trey's one of the strongest people I know. And I was like, well, that's an interesting question. I said, Trey's one of the strongest people I know. He has an open solar plexus. So there are times where he is engaged and he doesn't, he doesn't want to express what he feels, and so he will be silent. And he's also German Cherokee, so like two cultures of silence. Who can be really silent. I was like, so he can be sitting in a conversation and disagree with people and never say a word. And I know, there's a variety of reasons why he does that. One is he has determined in his own, consciousness that it doesn't matter.
Right.
That it doesn't matter that person has and he doesn't feel the need to explain how he has a different opinion. So there's that. There's also that he would walk a mile to avoid a confrontation.
Wow.
Like, I don't need that confrontation. Like now, I mean, I've seen him in recent years be more okay with expressing his anger or frustration.
Right.
But I have also seen that he will walk a mile away, from a confrontation if he feels like that confrontation is not going to change anything.
Right.
But the thing is that when you're in a relationship with people and they're telling you how they feel, what they think should happen, or, any number of things, and you're listening and you don't express your opinion, many people assume that you agree with them.
Yeah, true. Silence is agreement. Yeah.
Which can cause conflict down the road.
Yeah.
Because,
yeah.
So is it a weakness that you don't express your emotions or what you think or feel? I don't think it's to me, it's mechanics.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm talking with Trey, if he's silent about something, I'll say, is your silence that you have a different opinion?
Right.
And it's okay. I think one of the things, one of the positive things that always was stable in our relationship was we agreed to disagree.
Right. Yeah.
We always agreed to, there were certain things we knew we weren't going to agree on, and we could just let those go. There's no need, which I think was an awareness of mechanics before I even knew what mechanics were.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
can I have a toilet break, please? Now I have to go.
Oh yeah. Interesting, because I find it fascinating. Okay, so here we are. We're having a conversation now about emotional maturity or capacity to hold emotions, express emotions. And in the 41, in my 41.4, there's a keynote in the line companion that says, you can hold back fuel, waiting for the moment that the potential is there, because you can recognize that when the potential is there, you can get that energy across, you can focus on it. So there's, I think, another mechanic. That's not, it's the 41, so it's in the root. It's the impetus for the pulse, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's connected to the 30, but
it's fueling the emotional wave. Yeah.
So it's interesting that even in that root, the reason why the root is pulsing in that moment is because there's a feeling.
Right.
And I think that relates to me getting the download and having a date given to me, and
I felt your whole chart was being activated in this experience, because I was hearing more of your activations and channels. So yeah. Beautiful example. And a beautiful example that you're sharing all of this with us, with me. Yeah.
I think, my hope is that I really hope that our conversations, as we grapple with our mechanics and how things work, that we're inspiring other people's passion for grappling through their mechanics and how things work for them. And if I had one other hope, it would be like, how could we do this with a group or even just individuals? Because I understand how powerful our grappling is.
I think the way to figure things out is to share with other people and to express it. Because even now, when we are expressing, we are realizing things.
Absolutely.
And we get to insights, new insights. Yeah.
And I would love if any of you are listening, what are you grappling with? Is it the 4130? Are you grappling with something else in your, maybe you can connect it to your chart. Maybe you can't. Maybe you're just grappling with something. I mean, send Corinda and I a message Send us your chart, send us a message. We'd love to grapple with you. And we all learn from each other.